Hey, this is Sean from Phinehas, and you're watching Metal Cross TV.
Hey, this is Chris with Metal Cross. Sean, welcome. Appreciate your time. Thank you for sitting back doing an interview with us.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. So, curious, how did you come up with the band name Phinehas?
Actually, all of us guys who are in the band now actually inherited that name from former band members back when Phinehas used to be a local band in the LA area. But it's based out of Numbers 22. Phinehas is the grandson of the grandson of Aaron, who is Moses' brother. So that whole lineage is a lineage of priesthood, and basically, God eliminated the plague that was on the Israelites because of Phinehas' zeal for God's honor.
And you actually answered my next question was, what does it mean? So now you have a band symbol. It looks like a P with kind of an X down at the bottom of it. Yeah. Is there a meaning behind that symbol at all? Or?
Yeah, it's called a Chi Rho. It is the first two letters in Greek of Christ, superimposed on each other. It's one of the earliest forms of, or earliest symbols for Christ or warrior of God. And then we actually we have a new logo that is basically the same thing. It's just like split in half and flipped over to where you make the two halves intimate with each other, and then you get a Chi Rho. So it's kind of blooming, so we call it a Chi Rhos.
As a Christian band playing heavy metal, I guess you might get some resistance from, let's say, mainstream Christian churches or some mainstream churches. And then, now, what do you say to those that might not think that the style of music you play is glorifying God?
I got a lot of bitterness towards people like that, to be honest, and that's something that I've struggled with for a very long time. But I am the type of person who believes that you can use anything to glorify God, and if it's edifying towards other people, and if you do it in Christ's name, then I think that is worship. I think that is what we're trying to do as a Christian community, as followers of Christ in Christ, is to have the motives of bringing people together, bringing people closer, and sharing the gospel with them, and sharing with them truth, and hopefully being a light in their life.
We have something in common, and that's that we are all loved infinitely and completely right where we are at. You are loved unconditionally by a man named Jesus Christ. He wants you where you're at right now, not where someone else thinks you should be.
A lot of people have different ways about going about it. You could be a painter, you could be a musician, you could be, but at the same time, it doesn't have to just be creative things. It can be, working a job at Starbucks, and serving people, and anything like that. Like my dad builds houses. I know that, I think there's a lot of metaphors there, there's a lot of, I think that it could be anything, anything could be used to glorify God. And I think to say that it's not is, it's doing two things. It's excluding a lot of people when Christ said, "Come as you are." And it's putting his power in a box and saying, no, you can't move in this. Like, that scares me, or that's different. And it's just people who, maybe they grew up in a different generation, or they grew up in a different way, and that's okay. I'm not going to judge them. There's a long time in my life where I did, but just because it's different doesn't mean that it's wrong, and that it doesn't glorify God. I think that if anybody sat down and talked with any one of us, they would understand if they were willing to understand. But American Christianity has kind of put this suit and tie on the church, and expected people to walk in and to conform to that. And so that's not my brand of Christianity. I don't think that was what Jesus had in mind. He didn't have a bunch of honestly snobby people being like, hey, you got to fit into this box, you got to do this, you got to do that. If you're not doing that, well, hey, sorry, whatever. Jesus was an all-inclusive person, and I think if you read any of the gospel, that's what you're going to find. And so anybody tries to put a box on him, I don't really think you're doing it right.
Now, obviously, the Bible talks a lot about Satan, hell, spiritual warfare, putting on the armor of God, that kind of thing. And I mean, do you personally feel that the devil and demons are literal spirits that are trying to deceive us and draw us away from God?
I think yes and no, and here's why: is that I absolutely believe in spiritual warfare. It says that this battle is not being waged over things that we see. It's all of what's unseen. Like, there's so much more going on. I think a lot of people, try and justify actions by saying that, that there must be a demon or something like that, when really, it's just the nature of themselves, being a human and being fallen people. And, I think that, people want to put blame on that instead of themselves, because, that nobody wants to take responsibility for their own crap, which is an understandable thing. I've done that many times. But yeah, absolutely. I think that there's war being waged in souls. I think there's war being waged all around us, and I think that. Absolutely. I feel like I've seen people, in my experience touring, where I've looked at them and never seen somebody that looked so dead inside, and or defeated even, or oppressed, and but at the same time, I've seen so many people where they just walk into a room and it's like a beam of light. And you can tell that they're fixated on the light, and so they're just flooded with it, and it's just working its way out in whatever way it can, So, absolutely. I would say that the biggest killer of that is, not necessarily people who are just diametrically opposed to Jesus, but I would say it's the people in the center, where there's apathy, where there's indifference, and where people have stopped caring, to where, and I think that ultimately is from love of self, but, there's angels, there's demons, and I think there's demons in the center too. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. So, just not caring. I think there's a heck of a lot more going on than just what we can see or what we can perceive. So, whether that's a demon who, I believe, they take up a specific amount of space. They're not omniscient. They're not everywhere like God is. Whether that's that, or whether that is this spirit of indifference or lack of spirit. So,
you guys have had lots of releases out, and just curious with the popularity that Phinehas has. I mean, how do you stay as humble as you are with all that going on?
Well, there's been times in our career of touring where I definitely have been proud, and I've definitely put my my validation or my qualification in the band, and reading through 2 Corinthians that Paul's saying like there's nothing in that, and our qualification, validation comes from God, and so it's not because of what we've done, but it's because of what Jesus has done. And so there's been plenty of points that I can point to and be like, that was a moment where I was proud and immediately was just crushed because of it. Where it's as soon as you're proud, you start worrying about the things that aren't important, and you start worrying about the popularity, and you start worrying about numbers, or you start caring about how heavy this breakdown is, or whatever else. When I love music, and music is great, but if Jesus isn't in it, I would have stopped a long time ago. And so he's proven to us over and over again that it's not by our power that we're where we're at, and for instance, on this tour, just a week ago, we were on the side of the road after hitting a 6-point buck outside of St. Louis. Our tour manager / merch guy, Cameron, he ended up lending us his van, which was in Des Moines. Now that's 6 hours away. Now how are we going to get it there? Well, my girlfriend lives in Des Moines. I call her at 3:30 in the morning. She leaves at the drop of a hat, drives 6 hours after a couple hours of sleep,
Awesome.
and gets there to St. Louis around 10 o'clock. We drive 7 hours to Omaha together and make the show. The band before us, Silent Planet, they were on their 3rd song when we roll up. The timing of that and everything, it's I feel like God is on a just-in-time type of timeline, if we want to put it into terms of our timeline, or not our timeline, but our perception of time in general. But maybe he doesn't give us what we want, but he gives us what we need, and he does provide. And I've seen that time and time again where I've walked off from events like that. We've lost 2.5 vans in Washington alone. Lost another one in St. Louis just then. We've rented a very unreliable van. We've had really bad experiences with vans, and every time whenever something catastrophic happens, I've walked away with my middle finger in the air saying God, you're not in control. And then I just always feel so foolish a couple days later when everything absolutely does work out, and it works out even better. And so I am proud to be a part of the band, because I'm in a band with some of the best dudes that I've ever met in my life. But I know that that's absolutely grace.
Excellent. And then to just kind of wrap up, if there was an overall message that Phinehas represents or wants to get out to the fans, what would the message of Phinehas be?
There's a line in our song Dead Choir, off our new record Till the End. It just says, without grace we would all be dead. It's just simple, but very, very true. And the older I get, like the more I don't want to say that I understand grace, because I don't think I ever will fully understand grace. Me as a dude, it's very hard for me to accept love that hasn't been earned. It's very hard for me to accept love in general, that's just, I feel like a lot of guys struggle with that, but
For sure.
Like that same love that was extended to all of us, it's extended to your neighbor. It's extended to the person who's begging on the street, the person that you give money to who is just going to go and buy a beer. Like that same grace, that same love, no less, is extended to them. And, Phinehas has always been angled towards people who have been burned by the church and people who have been hurt by the church. And, I feel like that's, like all of us have been hurt by Christians in our lives. All of us have experienced that same exclusive Christianity that I was talking about earlier. Like I said, I was bitter about that for a very long time, and I've grown a lot to where like now I don't extend that same judgment that was extended to me back then, but or at least I try not to. We've all been, we have been about since the beginning, wanting to reach out to people who have been kicked out of church, people who have been mistreated, or did an interview with Heart Support and they called it de-churched, and it was a very interesting word because I had never heard a word for it that like described kind of what happened to me. And so as listeners or as Christians or as a community, a faith community in Christ, just to be aware that that happens to people is first step towards hopefully and like extending that same grace that has been extended to us towards other people. I think that will, I think and I believe that can create waves, and I mean when Jesus came to earth, like there were a lot of people who didn't fit the mold, who didn't think that they would be able to be used by God, or they had been judged by the rabbis, who walked around with makeup and whatever when they were fasting, or they would wail on the streets because they were praying and like, oh, I'm so righteous and stuff. And Jesus walked in and was like, what are you guys doing? Like, when you give to the church, don't make a big deal about it. Don't let your left hand see what your right hand is doing. Don't wail on the street like giving attention to yourself. Go into the secret place. That's where you're gonna find me. And so I think it, fighting against the love of self is a big deal, and I think that there's true love to be found after that is destroyed, and I think, like, I believe that, and I'm working on it, still not quite there, but like I believe that's what's behind that once that love of self is like obliterated, so, and that's only through Christ's power. So
Absolutely. Well, hey, Sean, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and hanging out with us here at Middle Cross. Thanks. Have a great show. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Thanks.